Now the air is clear over the lower Swansea Valley, but it used to be thick with smoke and toxic fumes. In the 19th century, most of the world's copper smelting was done in this valley. It was a world-class industrial centre with a thriving port, receiving raw mineral ores and exporting processed goods, especially copper products and sheeting for protecting the hulls of wooden ships. But by the middle of the 20th century, only a few active plants remained. Vast tips of toxic waste and slag spread out across the valley floor. Ruined blast furnaces and derelict buildings lay scattered across the barren landscape. Access to the area was limited to unpaved tracks. By 1961, the lower Swansea Valley was Europe's most derelict industrial site. So the University College, the town and the Nuffield Trust launched the Lower Swansea Valley project to plan the recovery of this historic area of post-industrial wasteland. A study team carried out extensive investigations to determine how the land could be made suitable for redevelopment. Tests were done to find what could grow on the toxic waste, and surveys made to evaluate foundation conditions, as well as flooding risks and other essential social and demographic information. The results were brought together to form a proposed plan, a blueprint for the redevelopment that has taken place in the subsequent 50 years. Now the air is clear, the waste and toxins have been removed, and even in the late winter light, the valley is once again green and prosperous, a place to live and work and play. Today, the valley is a hive of activities: light industry, commercial facilities, provision of services, retail outlets, business development, and new recreational facilities. A new stadium has been built for the Swans football team on the site of the old Morva waste tip, and a film called Jack to a King, the Swansea story, made about their resurgence. Recently, new homes have appeared along the riverfront where once the ships unloaded ore and coal directly into the great blast furnaces. Only a few sad remnants of the intense industrial past remain. The last chimneys of Havard Copper Works, the administration building and engine room are the last tangible remains of the hellish crucibles where our grandparents, some still alive today, worked such long hours. Dedicated people are now raising funds to preserve them. They hope to keep alive the memory of the grit and hard work that the strong men of Swansea and the women that supported them experienced, so that their descendants, living such a totally different way of life in the transformed valley, will not forget the sacrifices made by them. My name is Franklin Cardy, and when I was working on the project in 1963 as a geologist, I walked around the valley taking brief film clips with a 16mm movie camera. In 2012, I put these together into a YouTube video called Scenes from the Lower Swansea Valley in 1963, Where No Trees Grew. This raised a lot of interest, and so I worked on identifying the precise location of all the original shots. In 2012, I returned to Swansea to make a record of the dramatic changes at these same locations after 50 years. The rest of this video is a systematic collection comparing and contrasting the old shots with the new, from the air and from the ground at the same locations. 2 screenshots of the aerial photo mosaic commissioned by the project in 1960 and annotated with the precise locations insofar as was possible. The vertical aerial photos are from the 1961 black and white air photo mosaic and from Google Earth 2006 images, and show the precise locations. The ground shots are from the film I took in 1963 and the photos I took in March 2012 as close to the original sites as possible. Unfortunately, the weather was not very clear, but the trees were still bare, which allowed better viewing than in the summer. The locations of each original shot are described using today's street or district names, as well as by the index numbers shown on the aerial images, starting with LC1 at the north end of the project area. This location, LC1, was north of the road, just beyond the top of the original aerial photo mosaic, looking south. This plant was the Dufferin Steel and Tin Plate Works, which had closed in 1961, shortly before I was filming in '63. Now only a field remains. (1.1 to 1.8). At what is now Alberto Road, in 1963 I took a long, slow pan northwards from west to east, around and across the extensive tips. The pan ended with a distant view of one of the few remaining industries, Imperial Smelting Corporation plant, which had become a landmark in the post-industrial wasteland. This is the view from as close as possible to the same location. Location W1 to 7. This was a scrapyard at what is now Benson Way. The valley had become a dumping ground for old railway stuff. Even London Underground coaches ended up here. Location T3 to 6. Here, on what is now Coronet Way, Ruth Gadgill, working for the project, was carrying out vegetation trials to determine what could grow on the levelled tips, or what treatments would be needed to rehabilitate the land. At locations G1 to 3, with the help of Mr. Thomas, I was carrying out a geophysical survey to help determine the nature and depth of the foundation materials alongside the pipeline. The pipeline is still there on the left, but the path is now lined with trees. At locations E1 to 5. At this site, where ferryboat Close is now, mechanical buckets were being used to level and shape the tips, and also to remove material. Some of the waste was becoming valuable for reprocessing, as the costs of freshly mined raw materials were increasing. This was a fortunate economic trend that helped to resolve the problem of removing some of the toxic wastes from the valley floor. These weirs are near the site of the ferry boat that used to carry workers back and forth. Location 6. This location was beside the Llansamlet stream, near where it reached the River Towie. The view is northeast across what was left of the marshy floodplain towards the Imperial Smelting Corporation plant in the distance. Now the road crosses the stream just below the small dam that controls the level of the lake. Locations 7 and 8. The next view from Beaufort Road, where CEM Day is now, is similar, but is a longer view from the west side of the River Towie. Now the road is tree-lined, and the view to the northeast, along where the Llansamlet stream joins the Towie, is barred by thick bush and trees on the banks of the river. This is a shot that was taken from Clase Road, Morriston, looking northeast across the wasteland of old tips, some of which had already been levelled. Now the distant view is of greenery among the new buildings. Location V5. This is a similar view from Kilvey Rd, Morriston, higher up the hillside. Locations R1 to 3. This is from the railway embankment in the centre of the valley floor, looking north towards Seaman's Way. The flattened rubble in the 1963 panorama was the remains of the famous Mannesman Tube Works and the Landor Steel Works, which closed in 1960, partly because there was no road access. Now the area has mostly been built on, apart from one remaining field surrounded with brush and mist. Locations 2 and 5. Here we are essentially on Seaman's Way, looking northeast towards the familiar Imperial Smelting Corporation plant in the distance, visible behind abandoned buildings, with chimneys and Tudor-esque beamwork on the remains of the Villiers Spelter Works, which closed in 1929. Location 3. This location is located where the Towey business village is now. And we can get close-ups of this distinctive structure, long since abandoned but still standing in 1963. Location 4. This prominent ruin to the north of the Atlantic Close roundabout was likely the remains of the pit head for the so-called double mine. Location ES6. This is the view northwards from the junction of the Jersey Road and the A4217 near the Collier's Arms at Bonny Mine. Location 9. This is the view northwestwards from the same Bonny Mine site near the junction towards Castle Court, which is built on the site of the Imperial Smelting Corporation plant. Locations 9.2 to 9.6. This is a pan shot from northwest to northeast across what was the waste tips and swampy floodplain, now flooded to form the lake, towards the smelter along what is now Phoenix Way. Location E6 is a long distance view across the floodplain towards the chimneys near the Clase Road. Active tipping of waste was continuing onto the floodplain from the Imperial smelter. This area is now all covered by the tree-lined lake designed to help mitigate the concentrations of metals in the water. The lake itself is lined with limestone. Location 9.1. This is a closer shot of the Imperial smelter taken from the location of Charter Court, looking along Phoenix Way towards Castle Court, built on the site of the plant. Location ES5. This shot is northeastward from the junction of the Coombe Chapel Road with the old Jersey Road, the B5444. C1 to 8. This sequence shows the demolishing of the last chimney of what had been the Llansamlet copper and arsenic works. It was shot from a location about 200 metres west of Coombe Chapel Road on the bare hillside that is now thickly covered in trees. The Territorial Army carried out much of the dismantling of such structures. The side of the valley has been so extensively planted with trees that few long views are possible anymore. Only the abandoned track of the Swansea Vale Railway allows a longer perspective. L1 to 3. Hidden among a maze of abandoned waste tips in 1963 lay a small lake with barren shores and probably toxic water quality. A slow pan shot across the desolate feature showed no sign of life apart from some low scrub. There are now ducks on the lake, and although it still has an air of neglect, it is surrounded with brush and trees and signs of life, both animal and human. Location V1 to 3. These views are from Shepherd's Road on the western slope of the valley, looking southeastwards across the site of the Landor Steelworks to the railway embankment and viaduct over the River Towie, with Kilvey Hill in the distance beyond the bridge. Location B1. The old canal is now filled in and occupied by the A4067, the Ford-cum-Towie Road. This camera location was where the pedestrian footbridge now crosses the main road close to the junction with Beaufort Road. Location S1 and R4. The Beaufort Road sports field was relatively unchanged since 1963. The site of the Landor copper works and old coal mines to the south had been somewhat cleaned up, but this ruin was probably the remains of the old pithead. This was the scene when I was there, and just after that the site was extensively renovated, and the sports facilities were extended by the time of this July 2013 Google image. Location VW1 and 2, Coombe Level Roundabout. This has been built over the canal and part of the Landor Copper Works site. At location B2, the once bare banks of the River Towie were thickly covered with brush and trees, obscuring the view downstream through the bridge in 2013. But this has now increased with the recent clearing. Locations T1 to 1.3. The railway bridge itself has little changed from 1963 and still affords a commanding view of the valley floor as the trains cross the Towie and run into Swansea station. But now there are trees on the embankment beside the stadium car park. Location T2. This view of the viaduct from the south was once quite attractive when it was reflected in the water of the canal on a sunny day in 1963. Now the traffic roars past on the highway that covers all trace of the old canal. At location B3, the old bridge at Brunel Way is still there, although now joined by others. It offers a good view of the residential complex built recently on the site of the Upper Bank Copper and Zinc Works. Locations ICI 1 to 5. The remains of the Middlebank Copper Works in 1963. It is hard to imagine a less enticing property offered for sale than the old ICI land on the site of the Middlebank Copper Works at Pentraqueith. Nevertheless, it has been transformed and is now the site of a major roundabout that gives access to the old industrial core along the banks of the river, where a new residential area has sprung up. Locations A1 to 9. The White Rocks Copper Works at Pentraqueith. The White Rocks works were started by a Bristol company in 1737. The works closed in 1929 because by then it was more economic to smelt the ore where it was mined. But the waste tips were not cleared away until 1967. Some remains of the Havard Morva Copper Works, founded in 1810, still stand across the river in the hope of rehabilitation. The area includes remains of the inclined tramway that carried the spoil up to the hillside waste tips. Part of this was supported by a stone arch that still survives. In the 1980s, this area was designated as the White Rock Industrial Archaeology Park. There are also remains of the 18th century canal tunnel and the great workhouse of 1736 and the 17th century river dock and quays. Locations ES 1 to 4 at Pentraqueith. Somewhere on the slope of Kilvey Hill there used to be a row of houses, now long since disappeared. ES 2 and 3 at Pentraqueith. The road still runs along the lower edge of the old Middlebank tips at Pentraqueith. They are now graded and rehabilitated. Locations F6 to 8, the Upper Bank Station, Pentraqueith. Where the road comes now, the Swansea Vale Railway, still operating in 1963, used to pass through the ruins of Upper Bank Station. Just a year later, in 1964, it was closed to all traffic, and after an attempt at preservation, has now been torn up. Location ES4, Clase Road, on the Pentraqueith northeast. Not much structural change along the road, but lots of brush and trees obscuring any longer view across the valley. Looking northwest from Pentraqueith, this is NW1. This is the view from the Pentraqueith Road looking northwest. The Havard and Morber tips are on the left and the Upper Bank Works on the right. These were extensively excavated in 2007 to 8 before construction of the residences, and the foundations of the copper industry at the site of the Upper Bank Smelting Works, established in 1755, were laid bare. Other sites in the Swansea Valley may yet produce further remains of copperopolis, and it is hoped that the remaining standing buildings at Havard will be preserved as memorials to the great industrial heritage. FS1 to 5. This is All Saints on the Kilvey Road above Foxhole. This was a site of a long, slow pan down across the barren hillside to the industrial core along the banks of the river, taken from above the road. Now the hillside is almost completely forested and no comparable shot is possible. In conclusion, the Lower Swansea Valley project was one of the earliest environmental cleanup projects anywhere in the world. The project began in the early 1960s, seeking to reclaim the land. Over the next 20 years, the entire community of the area became involved in the work of restoration, working hand in hand with nature and economic and social development. Its success over the last 50 years shows what can be achieved when determined people work hand in hand with nature to overcome the depredations of the past. Many people still remember being involved in school outings, planting trees on the slopes of the valley. Even more people have recently enjoyed the resurgence of the local football and rugby teams in their new stadium, a prominent symbol of the return of the rehabilitated valley to the people of Swansea. Only a few sad remnants of the intense industrial past remain. Dedicated people are now raising funds to preserve them. They hope to keep alive the memory of the grit and hard work that the strong men of Swansea and the women that supported them experienced, so that their descendants, living such a totally different way of life in the transformed valley, will not forget the sacrifices made by them. That's the end of the before and after comparisons. For anyone wanting more specifics, here are screenshots showing all the locations on Google Earth images in the north, central and southern parts of the project area. Finally, two screenshots of the aerial photo mosaic commissioned by the project in 1960 and annotated with the precise locations insofar as was possible. A high-definition original of this is available. There is also an Excel spreadsheet with the coordinates of all the locations. For these or further information, please contact me at my email address, cardy.franklin@gmail.com.